Let's see it.
Welcome back to the Shadow Radio. Tonight, I have a story for you that will crawl beneath your skin and whisper your name long after the broadcast ends. They say working the night shift is lonely, but what if something out there, or something within the static, is listening to you, waiting, and promising your death before sunrise? Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and remember, whatever you hear tonight, never tune out. This is the last broadcast. Tonight's forecast: scattered showers, fog after midnight, and death. Luke Williams leaned into the microphone, his voice smooth and calm, despite the cold sweat beating at the back of his neck. The studio was silent, except for the low hum of the AC and the occasional flicker of fluorescent lights above. Midnight shifts always felt like this, eerie, heavy, and unnaturally quiet. He was alone in Studio B at WZXR, a small local radio station tucked behind an abandoned strip mall. The walls were lined with peeling acoustic foam, and the carpet smelled faintly of mildew. But Luke liked the solitude. At 33, he had worked this graveyard slot for over 5 years, ever since his divorce left him craving isolation. As he reached for his coffee, the red on-air light blinked softly in the glass window. He took a slow sip, his eyes scanning the playlist on his cracked laptop screen. It was nearing 1 a.m., time for his hourly news update. He tapped the microphone button, took a deep breath, and began. This is Luke Williams with your hourly news on WZXR 88.3. Authorities are still investigating the triple homicide in West Creek last night. Police urge residents to stay indoors after dark and report any suspicious. Static suddenly crackled in his headphones, making him flinch. He pulled them off, frowning, and tapped the mixer panel. The static vanished, replaced by silence. Luke sighed, thinking it was another glitch. The station's equipment was decades old, patched together with electrical tape and luck. He placed his headphones back on and was about to continue when a voice came through the feed, soft, distorted, and unnervingly familiar. Luke Williams, 33, DJ at WZXR, was found dead in Studio B at approximately 3:13 a.m., June 29th. Authorities say the cause of death was a deep laceration to the neck, severing the carotid artery. Investigators are treating it as a homicide. His blood ran cold. The voice sounded exactly like him. Same intonation, same professional cadence, but it wasn't him speaking. It was him reading a news report about his own death. Luke's chest tightened painfully. His trembling fingers reached for the playback file, thinking maybe he had left an old recording running by mistake. But the screen was blank. The feed was live. Jesus Christ, he whispered, yanking the headphones off again. His pulse thundered in his ears. The room felt suddenly smaller, the shadows in the corners darker and alive. He checked the studio. Clock, 1:02 a.m. He forced a laugh, his voice shaking. Probably just a prank. Some intern messing with the broadcast files, he said to himself, trying to drown out the fear rising in his gut. But deep down, something told him this was no prank. He pulled out his phone and called Terry, the station manager. It rang 6 times before a groggy voice answered. Luke, it's 1 a.m. What is it? Terry, someone hacked into the feed. They're playing some bullshit report about me, dying here, being murdered. Did you schedule something like that? For Halloween replays, or what the hell are you talking about? Terry interrupted, annoyed. There's nothing scheduled but your show and ads tonight. I'm serious, Terry, Luke snapped, his voice cracking. It was me, my voice, reading a news report about my murder. They even gave a time, 3:13 a.m. Tonight, there was silence on the other end. Then Terry sighed. "Look, Luke, get some fresh air. You've been working too many double shifts. I'll check the logs in the morning." The call ended before Luke could respond. He slammed the phone down, cursing under his breath. The silence in the studio pressed against his eardrums like cotton soaked in ice water. He turned back to the mixer and clicked through every open channel. Nothing. No saved files, no hidden broadcasts. Just dead air waiting for him to speak. He rubbed his temples, trying to shake off the creeping dread. Maybe it was a hallucination. Maybe he was just tired. But as he sat back down, he felt it. A presence. Like someone was standing just behind him, staring down at the top of his head. His scalp tingled with terror. He spun around in his chair. The studio was empty. The door was locked, the glass window dark. No one, just the red on-air light, glowing softly like a bloodshot eye. He turned back to the mic and forced himself to continue the news. His voice quivered, but he pushed through the rest of the segment before cutting to a classic rock block dot as Hotel California began to play. Luke slumped in his chair, his hands trembling violently. He checked the time again. 1:15 a.m. 2 hours until 3:13 a.m. He exhaled shakily, telling himself he was being paranoid. But the words from the broadcast, repeated in his mind like a broken record, was found dead in Studio B at approximately 3:13 a.m. He tried to distract himself by scrolling through the news for his next segment, but his eyes kept darting to the dark corners of the studio. Every flicker of light, every shadow shifting made him jump. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the studio camera monitor flicker. He turned to look at it. The small black and white screen showed the feed from the security camera mounted in the corner of the room. There he was, sitting alone at the desk, bathed in the dim glow of the monitors. But behind him, in the shadow by the door, was something else. Dark silhouette stood there, tall, motionless, head tilted slightly, as if watching him with inhuman curiosity. Luke's breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he turned his head. To look behind him. Nothing. He snapped his eyes back to the camera feed. The figure was still there. Closer now. Its head was almost level with his, as though it was leaning down to whisper in his ear. A faint, distorted whisper crackled through his headphones at that exact moment, sending a jolt of ice down his spine. Tonight's forecast: death. Luke ripped the headphones off and backed away from the desk, his chest heaving, heart slamming against his ribs like a trapped animal. He stumbled to the door, yanked it open, and ran into the empty hallway, gasping for breath. But as he reached for his phone to call 911, the studio speakers behind him crackled to life again, and his voice echoed through the empty station. Was found dead in Studio B at approximately 3:13 a.m. Luke's hands shook violently as he tried to dial 911. His thumb slipped twice before he finally pressed the green call button. The hallway outside Studio B was narrow and dimly lit, lined with old posters peeling off the walls. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, blending with his ragged breathing. 911, what's your emergency? A calm female voice answered. Luke pressed his back against the cold concrete wall, eyes darting toward the studio door as if expecting that dark silhouette to step out at any moment. This is Luke Williams. I'm at WZXR radio station on Route 6. There's someone here. They're messing with the broadcast. They threatened me. Please, I think they're in the building. Sir, is the intruder armed? The operator asked. I don't know. I saw them on the security camera, but when I turned around, there was no one. but they played an audio file, my own voice saying I was dead, that I'd been murdered here. Please, I don't know what's happening. He sounded hysterical, even to his own ears. There was a pause on the other end. Stay on the line, sir. Officers are en route. Thank you. Please, hurry. His voice cracked with relief, but fear still gnawed at his insides. He slid down the wall to sit on the cold linoleum floor, clutching the phone to his ear like a lifeline. The distant murmur of music still drifted from Studio B, Don Henley's, voice echoing eerily down the corridor. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. He shivered, trying not to think about the lyrics. Minutes crawled by. Every creak of the old building made him flinch. He kept staring at the door, half expecting it to open slowly, revealing that thing from the camera. Then he heard it again, a faint static crackling from his headphones on the desk inside the studio. The sound rose and fell like distant breathing. Luke clenched his jaw. He didn't want to go back in there, but he couldn't leave the broadcast running unattended. Dead air meant fines, and even now, a small rational part of his brain clung to that responsibility like a shield against madness. Summoning every ounce of courage, he stood up and crept back toward Studio B. The hallway seemed longer than before, stretching into darkness at the far end. His sneakers squeaked on the floor with every hesitant step. When he reached the door, he peeked through the small window. The studio looked exactly as he had left it, empty, monitors glowing softly, headphones lying on the desk. But the camera feed still showed that figure behind his chair, unmoving, as if frozen in place. Luke's stomach lurched. He reached for the doorknob, then stopped, shaking his head violently. No, I'm not going back in there. Let the cops handle it. He turned away, ready to wait outside in the parking lot, but then he froze. The on-air light above the door flickered rapidly. The music faded out, replaced by silence. A cold dread stabbed his chest. Dead air dot, then his voice echoed through. The studio speakers again, so loud he could hear it even from the hallway. This is Luke Williams with your final news broadcast. Authorities have confirmed my death at approximately 3:13 a.m. due to a deep laceration across the neck. Investigators are treating it as a homicide. My body was discovered alone in Studio B, eyes open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. His knees buckled. He pressed his fists to his temples, shaking his head, trying to force out the voice. It was too real, too detailed. The way he described his own death, he could almost feel the cold blade against his throat. Tears welled in his eyes. He had to shut it off, had to make it stop. With a strangled cry, he threw the door open and stormed into the studio. The air inside felt colder than before, like he had stepped into a walk-in freezer. His breath came out in trembling puffs. The headphones on the desk crackled with static, and the camera monitor flickered violently. Luke ignored everything except the mixer. He reached for the master volume slider to kill the broadcast, but as his fingers touched it, the static in his headphones stopped abruptly. The silence that followed felt like the grave. Then a whisper, "Don't turn it off." The voice was right next to his ear. Luke spun around, heart hammering so violently he thought it might burst. The room was empty. But the camera feed told a different story. On the monitor, the silhouette was no longer standing behind his chair. It was right next to him, towering over his shoulder. Its outline was blurred, like static given shape, but its head was wrong. Bent at an unnatural angle, it seemed to stare directly into the camera with two deep, sunken pits where eyes should have been. Luke screamed and backed into the corner, his hands scrambling for something, anything, to defend himself. He grabbed a metal mic stand and brandished it toward the empty air. "Get out! Leave me alone!" he shouted, tears streaming down his face. The figure didn't move. It only watched. Watched with silent, endless malice. Then the studio speakers crackled to life once more. His own voice, calm and professional, spoke again. Time of death, 3:13 a.m. Cause, exsanguination due to carotid artery severance. Victim found alone. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. No escape. Luke checked the studio clock with a sob. 2:22 a.m. Less than an hour. He dropped the mic stand and bolted for the exit. The moment he flung the studio door open, the lights in the hallway flickered and died. Darkness swallowed him. Only the faint red glow from the on-air sign behind him cast any light, painting his shadow long across the corridor floor. The cold deepened. He could hear footsteps behind him, slow and deliberate, echoing off the concrete walls. He ran blindly down the hallway, slamming his shoulder against the fire exit door locked. He pounded on it with both fists, screaming for help, but the metal didn't budge. Behind him, the footsteps grew louder, closer, until he could almost feel hot breath on his neck. Then the static returned, in his head, in his ears, in the floor, vibrating beneath his feet. Through the noise came a whisper, deep and resonant, rattling his bones. "You cannot run from your broadcast, Luke." His vision swam with tears and terror. He turned around, pressing his back to the cold door, ready to face whatever was coming. But the hallway was empty, silent, only the faint hum of the studio behind him remained. Then he felt it, ice-cold fingers brushing across his throat. Luke clutched his throat, feeling phantom fingers pressing against his skin. Cold, rough, and impossibly strong. His back slammed against the fire exit as he tried to twist away, but there was nothing there. Nothing visible. Only darkness. And that suffocating sense of being watched, of being toyed with. His ragged sobs filled the empty hallway. Somewhere down the corridor, the radio speakers continued broadcasting his voice. Time of death, 3:13 a.m. Stop it, he screamed, slamming his fists against the metal door behind him. Please, just stop. The footsteps began. Again, slow and heavy, like something enormous dragging itself across the linoleum floor. Luke forced himself to move, half running, half stumbling back toward the lobby. The emergency lights flickered dimly overhead, casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. He burst through the lobby door and nearly collapsed with relief when he saw flashing blue and red lights through the glass entrance. The police were here. A uniformed officer was stepping out of his cruiser, radio pressed to his shoulder. Luke banged his fists against the glass, screaming for help. Help me, please, help me. There's someone in here, he's going to kill me. The officer turned, startled, and spoke urgently into his radio. Luke saw him reach for the door handle and froze. The officer's face twisted in confusion as he rattled the handle again and again. The glass door didn't budge. Locked from the inside, Luke spun around to find the key, but the reception desk was empty. The building keys usually hung on a hook behind the counter, but tonight they were gone. He banged on the door harder, screaming until his throat felt raw. The officer pounded back, mouthing words Luke couldn't hear through the glass. Then his eyes flicked past Luke into the darkness of the station behind him, and his face changed. The confusion melted into wide-eyed horror. His lips moved rapidly, shouting something Luke still couldn't hear. He drew his gun, pointing it over Luke's shoulder, and started hammering the glass with the butt of his weapon. Luke turned slowly in the reflection of the glass. He saw it clearly for the first time. A shape darker than shadow itself, impossibly. Tall, with long, crooked limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Its head hung low to the side, almost upside down, and from the gaping hole where its mouth should be, a faint static hissed. The creature raised one elongated arm, the blackness of its form swirling like ink in water. Luke watched in frozen terror as it reached toward him with fingers that seemed to stretch endlessly. Then the glass behind him shattered as the officer finally broke through. Luke fell backward onto the concrete outside, gasping as cold night air flooded his lungs. "Jesus Christ, are you okay?" the officer yelled, grabbing him under the arms and dragging him away from the broken door. Luke tried to speak, but only choked sobs came out. Another officer ran up from behind the cruiser, weapon drawn. "There's someone inside," the first officer said quickly. "He said someone was trying to kill him." Both officers turned their flashlights toward the dark entrance of the radio station. The shattered glass crunched under their boots as they stepped inside, weapons raised. Luke scrambled to his feet, grabbing the car door for support. His body trembled so violently, he thought his bones might shake apart. He watched as the two officers disappeared into the building, their flashlight beams flickering across the grimy lobby walls. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, from deep inside, he heard them shouting, "Clear! Clear!" Luke sucked in a shuddering breath, but before relief could take root, the radios on the officer's shoulders crackled to life. Was found dead in Studio B at approximately 3:13 a.m. Cause of death, exsanguination due to carotid artery severance. Both officers froze mid-step. Luke felt his heart lurch into his throat. The voice on the radio was his, clear, calm, professional, exactly like the broadcast he'd heard in the studio. The two men looked at each other, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Then the static rose, louder than before, drowning out the broadcast. Over the hiss came a whisper, so deep and resonant, it seemed to vibrate the glass in the cruiser windows. "Return to your broadcast." Luke screamed as the flashlight beams flickered violently. The air inside the station seemed to warp and darken, like shadows pooling together. The officers raised their weapons and fired, deafening booms echoing in the narrow lobby. But the bullets hit nothing. The shadows only grew darker, thicker, wrapping around them like living smoke. Their screams filled the radio station, mingling with the static until both sounds became one. A deep, pulsing roar of chaos. Luke turned and ran. He didn't care where. Across the cracked asphalt lot, past the old billboard advertising WZXR Rockin' Your Nights since 1981. Down the weedy embankment toward the dark woods beyond. Branches whipped his face as he stumbled through the undergrowth. Somewhere behind him, the radio station speakers still crackled with his voice. Tonight's forecast: scattered showers, fog after midnight, and death. He fell to his knees in the dirt, sobbing hysterically. His chest heaved with every ragged breath. He pressed his hands over his ears, trying to block out the broadcast echoing from the building behind him. But even then, beneath the blood rushing in his head and his own panicked gasps, he heard it. A single deliberate footstep in the leaves behind him. He turned, tears blurring his vision, and saw nothing but trees and darkness. But he felt it, the same oppressive presence, the cold static crawling along his skin like insects. He staggered to his feet and ran again, deeper into the forest, the night swallowing him whole. Behind him, the radio station continued its final broadcast. The signal carried far across the county, hijacking other frequencies, slipping into trucker radios and static-filled car stereos. His voice spoke the same calm words again and again. Luke Williams, 33, EJ at WZXR, was found dead in Studio B at approximately 3:13 a.m. And through the speakers, wherever it played, listeners heard a faint second voice, hidden beneath the news report, whispering their names. The sun rose behind a curtain of pale gray clouds, casting a dim light over WZXR radio station. Red and blue police lights still flashed across the cracked asphalt parking lot. Yellow tape fluttered in the morning breeze, wrapped around the shattered. Glass entrance dock detective Carla Reyes zipped her thin leather jacket higher against the dawn chill. She had been called in at 4:30 a.m. when the two responding officers failed to check back in. Their panicked radio transmission had cut off mid-sentence. Replaced by nothing but static dot, she stepped carefully through the broken doorway into the lobby. Forensics teams were already at work, testing surfaces, photographing bullet casings, and cataloging shattered glass. Anything? She asked the lead forensic tech doc. He shook his head. The two officers were found unconscious in the hallway. No injuries, no sign of a struggle. Their weapons were fully loaded, no spent casings, despite them reporting shots fired. Medics checked them out. Physically, they're fine, but he hesitated. But what? Carla pressed. They won't wake up. Both are in some kind of deep coma. Vitals stable, but unresponsive. Carla exhaled slowly, her breath trembling. She walked down the hallway toward Studio B. The forensics team had propped the door open. Inside, the air was icy cold, despite the summer heat. Outside, the smell of stale coffee and mildew mixed with something else. An electric, burnt scent that made the hairs on her arms stand up. The studio looked untouched. Headphones on the desk, mic stand upright, monitors glowing softly with the station. Playlist still queued up. But what chilled her wasn't the cold air dot, it was the studio clock. 3:13 a.m. dot frozen. The second hand twitched, but couldn't move past that minute mark. She checked her watch. 6:02 A. Detective, a young officer, called from the hallway. She stepped out to find him holding a cracked laptop. We pulled the audio logs, like you asked. Anything unusual? He swallowed hard and held up a small digital recorder. You should hear this. He pressed play. Carla's stomach turned at the sound of the DJ's terrified voice, crackling with static and hysteria. Help me. Please, someone help me. He's here. Oh God, he's here. A burst of static. Then another voice emerged, layered beneath the DJ's panic. Deep, resonant, like the growl of something not human. Return to your broadcast. Then silence. Carla felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She took the recorder and stepped into Studio B, placing it on the desk beside the headphones. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark monitor screen. Tired eyes, pale skin, lips pressed into a thin line. She sat down slowly, the old leather chair creaking beneath her. For a moment, the quiet felt comforting, peaceful. Then, as she reached for the recorder again, the studio speakers crackled to life. Tonight's forecast: scattered showers, fog after midnight, and death. Carla froze. The voice was calm, professional. It sounded like a routine broadcast, except it was reading the details of the DJ's death. His name, age, cause of death. It even mentioned the exact time, 3:13 a.m. She looked up at the studio clock again, still frozen. The second hand trembled. Speakers crackled once more. Beneath the broadcast came a faint, distorted whisper. She leaned closer, straining to hear it. Detective Carla Reyes? Her blood turned to ice. The whisper spoke her name. She snatched the headphones from the desk and pressed them to her ears. The whisper grew clearer. Was found dead in Studio B at approximately 3:13 a.m. Cause of death: exsanguination due to carotid artery severance. Victim found alone. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. No escape. She ripped the headphones away, gasping for breath. Her pulse roared in her ears. The room felt smaller, pressing in on her from all sides. She turned to leave and froze in the dark reflection of the studio glass. Something moved behind her. A tall, warped silhouette. Its head bent sideways at an impossible angle. Long arms ending in twisted fingers reaching toward her. She spun around, gun drawn, but the room was empty. The lights flickered. The studio clock's second hand ticked forward once, 3:13 a.m. Her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She fumbled it out, her trembling fingers nearly dropping it. The screen displayed an incoming call from an unknown number. She answered with a hoarse whisper. "Hello?" Static hissed at first, then the same calm male voice spoke. "Detective Carla Reyes, 41, lead investigator on the WZXR incident, was found dead in Studio B at approximately 3:13 a.m. Cause of death, exsanguination due to carotid artery severance." She screamed and dropped the phone. The lights flickered violently now, the room plunging in and out of darkness. In every flash, the figure was closer, closer, until it stood directly in front of her, its eyeless face inches from hers. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. The static roared in her skull like a hurricane, vibrating her teeth, crushing her. Thoughts. The creature raised one crooked hand and pressed a finger against her lips. She returned to your broadcast. Epilogue that morning. WZXR's signal carried far beyond its usual range. Truckers along Route 6, commuters in nearby towns, late-night security guards sitting, alone in dimly lit lobbies, all heard the same broadcast. Bleed into their radios the calm male voice reading news of deaths that hadn't yet happened. Their own names, their own ages, their own causes of death and beneath every broadcast, hidden within the hiss of static, came the same whisper. Return to your broadcast? No one knows what the frequency is. No one knows when it will reach them. But if you hear it, if you hear the last broadcast, know this. It isn't a prediction, it's a promise. If you're still here, congratulations. You survived tonight's broadcast, but be careful, because the last broadcast reaches everyone. Eventually, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the Shadow Radio, leave a comment below, and like this video to keep the static away. For now, I'll see you in the next broadcast, unless it sees you first.